Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are on a mission to answer 4 questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. So today we are pleased to have special guest, Mike Chanat. Mike, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good,
Thanks,
good.
Dr.
How about
Dave.
yourself?
Not too bad. Enjoying a little bit of the cold weather up here north. Can't complain, but it's nice and sunny. So as long as it's sunny and not cloudy, I'm happy.
I was to say we're in the northern part of Virginia. We have our own deep freeze going on here that's about to get worse. And I was to say you're up in New York, correct?
Yes. We've basically been hugging around 23 to 28 lately. And actually, during the Christmas holiday a few weeks ago, we were down in Atlanta, and I think Atlanta only peaked at 43 before we went to Florida, where our home is, and we're back up to the 60s and 70s. And by the time we left, it was like 83, so we were nice. So
jealous.
Take it. Yes.
Jealous. Well, introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of who you are, what you do. Give us the scoop, Mike.
Sure thing. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, which is one of the 5 boroughs for the people who aren't familiar with New York City or New York State at all. So it was a very diverse area to grow up in. A lot of lessons that you learn from being on the streets and dealing with different communities and people. My parents were immigrants, so I'm first generation here. It was a very interesting upbringing that way. My father was a World War II veteran, so from him, when we talk about leadership, always had something, lesson to learn from him. Even though he really didn't talk about his combat time, he did present other ways of dealing with people and what to do and what was right and wrong, which kind of helped put my compass on a straight north path for leadership. As far as my emergency service experiences, I'm coming up on 37 years of working either in fire, police, or EMS. I started off as an 18-year-old volunteer in college, took advanced first aid, became an ambulance attendant.
Okay.
After that, I got that bug, wanted to work on the ambulance. So I took my EMT class, became an EMT, and then found that there was a lot to do. But what was one of the early leadership lessons is people look to you for answers. And here I am, 18, 19, and I'm responsible for people's lives. But I went on to take my paramedic course, and one of the next steps in my leadership journey as a paramedic was learning that now not only am I responsible for the patient, I'm responsible for newer, younger partners, I'm responsible for EMTs, and I'm responsible for building relationships with, in our case, the firefighters in the FDNY or the rescue companies or the NYPD and their emergency service unit, because a lot of times when we went on jobs with entrapments or building collapses, these units would be there operating with us, so we would have to learn how to manage those people, different languages, different jargon and stuff like that.
Learn how to play nice in the sandbox.
Exactly. And back then it was rough between the 2 major agencies, Big Red and Big Blue. So from there, because of the working relationships I had, I enjoyed what the emergency service unit did. So I went on to become a New York City police officer. I retired from there. When I finished that, I had moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, so I joined one of my local fire departments, learned about being an interior attack firefighter, learning how to use rescue tools and everything else, and a different set of relationship building skills, because there you operated with larger teams, usually an entire truck company or an engine company, so you're responsible for more people than just either in a police car with just one partner or an ambulance with one partner. So again, your style had to adapt and grow and evolve. And what I've been fortunate is, regardless of where I've been in the emergency service, I've always had the opportunity to be an instructor, to teach. And I found that as one way to grow my opportunities as well as grow my knowledge base with what's going on. And that kind of helped frame my thinking as a leader. And at this point, I'm fortunate to be working for a company as a station lieutenant. We have 7 stations in Rockland County, and I happen to run the daily operations for one of those and oversee the people that serve our community.
Nice. What kind of was the impetus of all right, I'm going to end my police department career and go full-time EMS?
Well, wasn't my choice. Let's say that what had happened, and most people think, oh, ooh, he got jammed up, locked up, something. No, no, no.
Mm.
I happened to have chest pain one day, and unlike a lot of young people who ignore it, which we learned that the hard way in EMS, and they become our customers.
Yeah.
Um, I ended up going to the hospital, getting it evaluated. They did a angiogram, found the blockage in one of
Mm.
my left circumflex, and they did a angioballoon, angioplasty, and put a stent in. And unfortunately, under the state law, that kind of medically disqualifies me to be a police officer.
Gotcha.
Um, so I had to change careers at that point. So I returned to where I had started, back to EMS, and I enjoyed that. I've always had one foot in the door with EMS. I've never let my certification lapse. I've always either done it paid or volunteer. Large municipal agencies, small village fire department,
Mm.
all kinds of different services, and each of them bring um, unique learning opportunities in terms of the different dynamics, how they operate, what their concerns are, and as a leader, how do you address those concerns and support your people? Trying to motivate and inspire a volunteer is a lot different than trying to motivate and inspire somebody who's paid, somebody who's in a paramilitary organization and is used to taking commands.
Yeah.
Will respond one way as opposed to somebody who's like, I don't get paid for this. What do you mean I got to do that? So there's a whole different set that as a leader or as a manager or as a supervisor, you have to start thinking about. And that kind of over the years helped form and get my thoughts thinking about how do we motivate people? How do we deal with people? And different styles come sometimes from their different backgrounds, their different understandings. And that's where myself as a leader started growing. I guess one of the things you always want to know is like, what is leadership? And for me, it's about influencing people, communicating effectively, and getting people to work together towards a common goal. Um, and being good at that has to begin with being good yourself. So you have to do a reflection. And what I've kind of been going into I guess, a deeper reflection over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, as I gotten heavier into developing my own company on leadership development and taking my journey to a new level, has been creating a framework that works for all situations and for all people. And that framework that I developed, I've dubbed it the Key Three, or CME. Instead of continuing medical education, it's
Yeah.
communication, mindset, and empathy. And a
Nice.
combination of any of those pillars will get you through what you need to do. There's always the need to be effectively communicating when you're dealing with a family member, a loved one, the patient. You can't talk to a patient the same way you talk to the doctor that you're doing the handoff report. You
Nope.
can't talk to the family member who has a different set of emotional values, that their elderly parent may be passing away and their elderly parent who doesn't want to deal with the hospital. So you have to learn to speak with people. You have to have empathy on different levels. And the biggest thing that helps you along the way is the type of mindset that you have, that you adapt, because that gives you the resilience to be able to last in a field like the emergency services, like myself, for 37 years, almost 4 decades of being out there and serving the public in their time of need.
No, I agree with that 100%. Like I said, I've been over 30 years myself in some way, shape, or form. And like I said, it's how you communicate with everybody's just a little bit different. Like I said, how you communicate with your team are different, and how you communicate with, like I said, some of the partner agencies that come in. Hey, like you're absolutely right. How you deal with the patient versus, the hospital staff, the physicians. I mean, it's all, you have to adapt how you communicate, and your style. And like I said, what your, the level of language, just everything has got to
Mm-hmm.
be completely kind of custom, and really want to communicate with people how they need to be communicated with, instead of just having a boop, boop, there it is type
Yep.
of style.
And that's very important what you were saying. We were kind of joking, like when we started, my mic wasn't working because I had the wrong mic input connected, but I was able to tell that you were hearing me because you started laughing at what I had said. And because of that, it brought in that communication isn't just about speaking. So as a leader, you need to understand that it's not just the words you say, it's how you say them, how they are received, how they are they understood, and um, if they are understood, and communication, when they look at one of the models being kind of a loop, the message that's coming back at you, are you listening and understanding what is being said? So one of the things that I always try to teach in you guys is do a closed feedback loop. Make sure that if you are in a situation, me giving you orders is going to be different than me telling the patient that they need to stand up, pivot, and sit back down onto our stretcher or stair chair, is going to be different than the way I'm going to explain it to the child of the parent, or if it is a parent, explain how they're to the 3-year-old in a different way than I'm going to explain to the parents. So there's all these different ways of doing it. There's the nuances, and the biggest part, like I said, is listening. We had an example where there was one lady that I was familiar with because we had been doing wellness checks on her through our community paramedicine program.
Nice.
But on this particular day, when I was doing the 911 side, we had gotten a call there. The home health aide, the daughter, the 2 EMTs, the cop are all in the other room. They're loud. They're like, you got to go, you got to go. They're all telling her, and they're all thinking that she's saying no, no, no. I walked in, I got down on one knee, so I was at her level. I said, listen, what's going on? She says, I'd rather not go to the hospital. And I said, oh, I don't know anybody who would rather go to the hospital. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, you understand what I'm saying? Everybody kept thinking she was saying no, 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 no. She wasn't saying no. She was just expressing, or maybe not expressing, that she had a fear and a concern. And I explained to her, and I said, you know me through the community paramedicine program. You know if you're fine, that I usually will leave you in place. You stay home, and our mission is to keep you out of the hospital. But unfortunately, there's something I see today. I think you need to go. Would you then be willing to come with us so that we can take care of this, so that you don't get to that bad position that first introduced us in the community paramedicine program? And she said, yes, okay. And everybody looked at me like, how'd you do that? And it was all about listening.
Yeah, they're looking at some magic fairy dust, and it's there. No, I'm getting on the level, listening to what they're saying, actually understanding what they're trying to relay. They're not refusing care, because that's the first thing everybody. Oh, it's a refusal. Let's just get a signature and get out of here so we can get back to the station.
Time out.
And she's just saying, I'm kind of comfortable here. I really don't want to go. I love how you put it. Well, who does? I mean,
exactly.
You're like, you could be like, I work at the hospital. I don't even want to go to the hospital. So, I mean, of course you don't want to go. I mean, that's my job and I don't want to go. But I mean, exactly. Then once she understood that, it's not terribly difficult to, if they realize that you are genuinely have some concern for their well-being and you're trying to do the right thing, people pick up on that. And like I said, then they're a little bit more willing to, okay, I'm not thrilled about it, but I will go with you so I don't get so bad. I end up on a tube and in an ICU for another couple of weeks again, like I did before or whatever. So,
yeah. So just circling back to your question about good leadership. So part of that, as I was saying, is the effective communication. But part of it is when you change your communication with the different people, it's being adaptable. So you have to be a flexible individual, because a lot of times when you come up with a plan, as soon as you get there, in battle, they say once the first shot's fired, all battle plans are out the window. With us, as soon as we show up with a great triage plan and the first patient shows up, they're like, okay, now we got to do something else, or some other variable comes in that, our portable doesn't work, or somebody forgot to restock this last week. Things happen. So you have to be flexible. You have to be adaptable, and think about that. And that also helps you with your growth. And part of that is adapting a diverse team and working with people that have different ideas, because sometimes you walk in and you'll see people kind of struggling on how to do something, and then you kind of walk in from a different angle and you're like, oh, let's try this. And all of a sudden, like you said, they look at you like you had some magic pixie dust or whatever. and it's not. It's just because you had a different experience, either because you had a higher volume of calls or situations of dealing with this, or you just happen to look at it literally from a different angle and see something they didn't see, that the patient was caught on, or the dress was caught on, and stuff like that.
It's a lot of fun seeing the light bulb turn on people. They finally get it. And I know we kind of touched on a few of the little points when we're kind of going through the intro. And if there's still stuff with the intro that you want to throw in, please do. But since we were starting to venture that direction anyway. Let's formally get
Yeah.
on to the first question and say, what does leadership mean to you and what does good leadership look like?
All right. So, leadership. Leadership is service, it's influence, and it's communication.
Nice.
You need to be in a place where you understand it's not about you. It's not about either having a rank or a title. It's not about you being the hero. Um, it's about the individuals that are calling or are in need of your help. And along my career, sometimes I usually backpedal all the way back to high school. And when I tell people, so that was my first paid job, was getting paid to. With that, their time of need was they have an exam coming up or they have a concept they don't understand. They came to me for help.
Right.
It's a lot different than what people look at that they're getting mugged. Okay, serious. No, somebody's time of need doesn't have to be a big emergency. And part of that turns out that service also not only includes our patients or the people of our community or students, it includes our peers and it includes the people we're responsible for, whether it's another EMS crew or another agency. Checking in on how they're doing. So it's service to them. What can I do to you? What obstacles and barriers can I remove from you successfully completing your mission? And how do we get that done? As we were kind of saying during the introduction, if you're in a command and control type of agency, kind of like the NYPD at times, the FDNY or fire departments at times, where they require a certain degree of obedience in certain situations, you don't necessarily get that when you're dealing with a mixed group.
Correct.
In the current system where I'm working, we, the paramedics, arrive on scene with in a rapid response vehicle or fly car. So it's two of us come out of a Suburban. We have our gear. We begin the initial care. The primary form of transport is volunteers responding from their home to their building, getting in the ambulance, bringing the ambulance to us, and providing the EMT or basic level of care.
Gotcha.
So for us to be able to, number one, influence and get volunteers to do something or to get EMTs that might have that us and them between ALS and BLS in some places, you need to understand how to speak with the people and how to get them to do things and work towards that common goal. And one of the best ways of being able to do that, as I said, to finish off my triad, is through communication. So in order to serve and influence, you need to be able to communicate a clear vision. You need to be able to make sure that they're understanding it and they're getting that through and they're able to embrace that common goal, whether it's to get the patient out of the house, whether it's to help solve this crime, or it's to be able to take one of your workers who might seem a little off and be suffering from possibly cumulative psychological trauma or PTSD or something, be in tune with them and communicate and say, hey, how you doing? Not simply as a passing by, hey, what's up? Boom, as we did in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. and you go by. But be genuine and sincere in how are you doing? How are you feeling? Because how am I doing? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm here. Well, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Because I could tell that something's not quite right. You're not as bubbly. You seem a little uneasy. The last time when we dealt with this young kid, what's the problem? Oh, and that brings me into like a different story. Is we had a couple of weeks ago, we had a weekend where one of my partners, she had 2 pediatric cardiac arrests in one 12-hour shift. And then that town had a third. So there was a lot of that going on. So I asked her how she was doing. And to my surprise, she was dealing with, she kind of understood stuff like this unfortunately happens. She said, I did the best that I could. and that was good. But what amazed me was later that evening, as we were driving around, she started asking some of the police officers that she knew that were on the scene with these, how
Right.
were they doing? And I was like, wow, it was really nice to watch somebody else. And they always say that the goal of a leader is to make more leaders. And I guess the way my role modeling was rubbing off on her, it was one of those where you get those kind of like proud parent moments. Your protege had gotten it, and she was going around and she was asking the cops and checking in on them because she knew they don't have the same training we do. They don't have necessarily the same understanding that people are going to die despite doing everything right.
Right.
A lot of times, whether it's law enforcement partners, firefighters, or the general public, they have one view of when we show up, we're going to cure everything, but that doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah,
So
wave
that's
the
one of the
magic
lessons.
wand.
Yeah. No magic wand, no
No
pixie
magic
dust,
wand.
nothing
No,
like
this
that.
isn't
Yes.
Hogwarts.
Yeah. And that was probably one of the hardest lessons that I had as a young EMT, but I think we'll hold that one off for a little later. So
Okay.
as far as good leadership, I think I started talking about it was that you need to begin with yourself. You need to be able, and I forget who wrote the book, but Learn to Lead Yourself is, I believe, the title. So begin with leading yourself. And whether it's Maxwell or somebody else, like I said, there's a lot of great books out there, but the number one premise is if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So when we deal with wellness, mental health, a lot of stuff that back when I started was just kind of like, hey, suck it up, tough it up, or just move on to the next call, and you keep going and going and going. It just builds up. We've realized now over the years with lots of studies is these little things chip away at you. It may not be one traumatic event. It's just a lot of little things chipping away, chipping away, chipping away until finally you break.
Yep.
And it's these things that if you're going to pour into others, you need to have something to pour. So making sure you're getting good rest, energy, you're in good shape, making sure that you have a growth mindset, that you're reading and learning and keeping up on the new stuff so that you can teach the other people everything that's going on, and making sure that they're up to date as well and that they're able to provide in their stuff. So beginning with self-awareness of where you are, understand your biases, where you come from, what triggers you and sets you off. If you're going to be a leader, you can't be the person screaming and yelling and losing their stuff, because they're going to look at you and say, who's this clown?
Yep.
You need to bring the calm to the chaos.
Yep.
And it's understanding that when we walk in, certain things are going to bother us. And I've grown, and again, operating well in stressful situations begins by building relationships during the calm times. So my partners and I have gotten aware of each other over the years as to what sets us off or who or whatever, or we can read each other. So we know when we walk in and the patient or a family member or somebody says the wrong thing, or so the new kid on the block that shows up does the wrong thing or grabs the wrong bag or whatever, don't get frustrated. I remember, again, we usually, to pull the EMTs into our world, we allow them to help us. We call it ALS assist, whether it's they spike our bag or they help us set up an IV start kit or something like that. So as I was working with one patient, I was starting the IV. I handed the bag and the drip set to my EMT, and I asked her, I said, could you spike this bag? So I forgot which way she had done it, but she found a creative way of there's with people who are watching that don't understand, with the IV tubing, there's one end that has a spike and one end that's supposed to go into the hub that's on the patient's arm.
Yep.
So the end that was supposed to be attached to the patient, she had connected that to the bag and then run the fluid through it. And somehow it worked, because when she handed it to me to plug the IV in, I was like, oh. And again, so instead of blowing up, yelling and screaming, which I've seen other people, and when I was a brand new medic, I had one partner that had, I can't believe, and for fear of getting yelled at, I would never make that mistake again. I'd go on to make other mistakes,
Yeah.
but I'd never repeat that mistake, because God forbid so-and-so was going to yell at me again. So that being said, I learned that that's not the type of leader I want to be. So in this situation, again, I said, all right, I just casually unplugged it, spiked it the correct way, connected it, flushed the line, connected it to my patient, hung the bag up. We got to the hospital, and after we handed off the patient, I spoke with the EMT. I said, was that the first time you ever spiked the bag? She goes, yes. I said, I could tell. I said, let's talk about how we do it. And the next time when you're not sure on how to do something, don't be afraid to ask. I said, I know maybe some other people might yell at you, might say, oh, don't you know how to do that? No, everybody's got to have a first day, and everybody's got to learn at some point. So if you're not sure, I'm unlike any other person you've met. Come to me. I'm not going to bite your head off. I'm not going to yell at you. I've been in your shoes. Having that empathy, understanding where it is, and remembering that helps to ground me. Understanding your biases, that you might not like certain people, certain types, certain foods, whatever it is. That helps you walk in and say, okay, well, I'm coming into this situation. I need to control my reactions, or maybe I need to delegate and ask my partner, hey, Jane, do you mind if you step in and deal with this patient? Because maybe you might have had bad history with the patient the previous time. A lot of times we deal with opioid overdoses, and unfortunately, some of the people have a regular habit. So you're coming to them frequently. Maybe the last time you woke them up from their high and they punched you in the face, and now you have that as the last memory of your interaction with this person. So you come in a little heated. You need to realize that you need to control yourself, because it's not the patient's fault. And you intervene, and again, you delegate to your partner. You ask them to do something. So all these different things help with becoming a good leader, and understanding that it's not all about you having all the answers, or you having to do everything. Allow people to do, train people to do, allow them to help. Don't be rigid, be adaptable. Good leaders understand that there's multiple ways of doing something. I'm trying to remember, I believe, I don't remember if it was one of the World War II generals, and I can't remember which one exactly it was, said, tell people what you want done, don't tell people how to do it. So basically, hey, I need you to get the patient from the house to the ambulance.
Yep.
That's what I need done. So you're telling them what to do. Get the patient out. Don't tell them how. Don't tell them that it has to be a reeve stretcher or a stair chair. Don't tell them that you have to take them out on a backboard or a scoop stretcher. There's multiple ways. Don't tell them that they have to go down the front stairs, when if they're in a split ranch home, they can just go the other way and exit the garage and not have to go up and down a flight of stairs unnecessarily. There are multiple ways to accomplish the same task. As a leader, if you're directing and you're guiding in that same situation, I might be saying, hey, let's get the stair chair and whatever. Be open, be adaptable to somebody saying and giving you feedback, saying, hey, that might be a problem. Why don't we just put them on a Reeves and carry them out? It'll just be easier because they're weak from the stroke or whatever is going on. So be adaptable. Being adaptable is going to allow you to survive. I can't believe I'm saying it's been 5 years, but 5 years ago, when COVID was still coming out, we watched adaptability at its best. People were pivoting and flexing and doing it. Businesses that survived had leadership that was flexible. that saw that there had to be different ways of doing what they're doing or offering different services. In EMS, we had to learn to be adaptable with our protocols.
Yeah.
As new information was coming out, our protocols were changing almost daily. We had to be flexible with how we approached patients. So a lot of what we were thinking had to change. And a lot of, I'm taking it a step back. I started, like I said, almost 4 decades ago. So my first introduction wasn't to a pandemic, but it was to a epidemic. And the epidemic was HIV and AIDS.
Yep.
And with that, when I learned to be an ambulance attendant and an EMT at first, we didn't wear gloves. The only
Correct.
time there were two instances you put gloves on. One was changing the tire so you didn't get the grease and dirt on your hands. And the other time was childbirth.
Yeah.
Those were the only two times you really put on gloves. Trauma, blood, bleeding, you kind of wore it like a badge of honor on your white shirt. Your hands were usually in all over different things. And then along came HIV and AIDS, and we had to rethink things. And we watched how a pendulum swung one way with people overreacting. We had to learn, and we had to become adaptable to how we operated. We had to learn to put on gloves all the time. We had to then learn that some people got allergies and sensitivities to the latex, so we had to adapt again and get nitrile gloves. We had to learn and understand that these people had different ways of how they can contract it. So you couldn't walk in with a bias. You had to walk in with an open heart. You had to be empathetic that this is a human being that you're dealing with. So a lot of these things were going on. But the problem that I noticed from then to the epidemic, from the epidemic to the pandemic, was a lack of communication. When information wasn't flowing freely, when it was being controlled or being politicized one way or another, the lack of communication is what created fear. Once
Yes.
information was flowing and people understood, you eliminated the fear. One of the biggest things that as we had to do as leaders is when there were daily changes in protocols, and sometimes when you turned out your day crew by the afternoon before you turned out your night crew, the protocol had changed because new information became available. You had to effectively communicate. So you had to find different ways of communicating. So the standard thing would be usually you had a roll call, but now we weren't allowed to stand shoulder to shoulder. So how do you give out that information?
Yep.
Started using things like WhatsApp for doing it. Communication, realizing the way I'm used to picking up a phone, and I pick up a phone and I'm doing it like this. Kids these days picking up a phone is talking on a phone like this. So you have to understand there's different ways of communicating. How do you get the information out? How do you get the information to your community? So these are all things that good leadership needs to do. They need to effectively communicate. They need to be flexible. They need to build relationships, and they need to build these relationships one conversation at a time, one event at a time. Getting to know the capabilities of your EMTs, of your local volunteers, of your paramedic partners, getting to know the capabilities of your small town police department versus your large metropolitan police department, getting to know the capabilities of the fire department, the capabilities of the different hospitals. Is it a community ER with 5 beds, or is it a metropolitan hospital with 50 beds? What are the capabilities? And understanding and building these relationships work. An example I have of that, and it might come in a little later, is Flight 587. Flight 587 was November of 2001. That was the flight that took off out of JFK Airport and crashed in Bell Harbor, Queens. It was almost 2 months to the day of 9/11. So here we are thinking, we heard a boom, we saw a tail rudder come down, we saw a pile of column of black smoke. We said, oh no, we're under attack again. So that was the first wave of thoughts that we had. But that day I ended up getting on the scene as a police officer, and the 5 or 6 of us that were there at first, we were there early on before any formal leadership showed up, management, supervisors, chiefs,
Right.
And stuff like that. So my EMS training people, they looked at me, they said, what are we going to do, Mike? I said, we got to evacuate. And they looked at me puzzled. communication. They wanted to know where. My mind was several steps ahead. So as a leader, while you're thinking strategically and tactically, you got 5 or 6 steps ahead. You need to effectively slow yourself down and make sure that the people that you're with, that you're leading, are brought up to speed with you and that they're on the same page as you. So then I said, oh, I'm sorry. If they're on this side, we're going to send them down to the ocean side. If they're on this side, we're going to send them up over to the bay side, but just get them away from where the impact zone was. And then while they were doing that, again, based on my EMS training, I said, well, we're going to need a casualty collection point. So I went to the local high school and said, okay, this is great, but we need supplies. So here's where relationship building came through. Having worked in EMS previously, I got to know the dispatchers. So I called the dispatchers directly. I was able to request units to come to that high school for that instance. I had a good relationship with my sergeant who was back at the command. I called him and I asked him, I said, are the Red Cross vans that were providing support mission for World Trade Center and Ground Zero in the pile? I said, can you call them up and see if they have an extra truck that they can send here with supplies and stuff like that? Having known the local hospital and built that relationship up, I knew what number to call. And I asked, hey, I think you guys probably know by now that there's a plane crash, but can you send a doctor or a PA or somebody to the high school? We're setting up a casualty collection point here, triaging and stuff. They're like, sure. So by building these relationships ahead of time, the day of the emergency, the day of the chaos, I didn't have to think and worry because I knew I had people I could rely on. So again, good leaders build relationships. And they develop these people, and they do it before they need it. And my partner and I were talking about this the other day. You make relationships with everybody because everybody has value at some point and some time. You just may not know what it is at that moment that you're building that relationship.
100%. It's funny. A couple of things that you talked about, and then we'll wrap up this segment and go into our next segment, is when you were talking about communication. And I like how you were setting the stage for folks that, hey, if you've never done this before, don't be scared to ask. You're better off asking questions. I like the fact of what you were talking about, having to communicate with different people in different ways. For example, you mentioned a couple times about the paramilitary style organizations, fire department, police department. You got a big organization like that. Yes, they're used to, hey, we give a command, you give an order, it's done. But I think in the late 80s, early 90s, people started finally realizing you can't use the same dealings with people in the station as you do on the fire ground. Yes, you have to give an order. And yes, and luckily it has got to the point where if somebody sees something that may be safety related, they can kind of, hey, stop, challenge, put a kibosh on what's going on, at least to say, hey, did you see this or did you consider this? Because sometimes, obviously, whoever's got the Suburban in the radio putting the fire out obviously doesn't see everything all the time. So at least you've kind of built in that it's okay to say something if you think it's safety related. But I remember a lot of folks that would try to lead at the fire station saying that they would lead at the fire ground. Just barking commands and barking orders, and it's like, okay, there's the life-threatening urgency for me to get this mop, and same as, oh my God, that we're getting ready to lose this whatever. So the urgency is there. So being able to adapt your communication style to whoever, and I think you were talking about a couple books on the subject, but there's a good 1-2 punch that John Max developing the leader within you, and obviously yourself. And then the second one for different leadership personnel is developing the leaders around you. And it's kind of a 1-2 punch in that order, because obviously, like I said, you're not going to be able to develop other leaders if you can't develop yourself and work on yourself. And a lot of what you were talking about with having to kind of keep yourself under control and understanding what triggers you, and when it really goes heavy into emotional intelligence. You have to be emotionally intelligent enough to realize, I have to really take a deep breath and go into this situation and kind of put my feelings to the side, or I need to get somebody else to do that because I don't think I'm going to be able to handle that because of the bad experience I had. So it really has a lot to do with emotional intelligence. And it's funny, at the time, you don't really think about it, but it's amazing how much leadership development and leadership training goes into a paramedic course, paramedic program, paramedic training, because you realize, I remember years ago, They say, hey, you're the highest level certification person on scene, right? You're the one that's people are going to look to. And one specific thing you had mentioned is leaders bring the calm.
Yes.
And that if you're freaking out and they're like, oh my gosh, the EMTs and the cops and the firemen and everybody else is looking at you as the medic and you're flipping your lid, they're going to think everything's going to go straight to hell. Where if you walk in there and it's proverbial plane crashes into nursing homes and bodies flying and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of hell and mayhem.
Yep.
And you walk in like, hey, this is just another day, man. We do this every day. You're just as cool as a cucumber. They look at you like, oh, well, it lowers the temperature. You're like, well, maybe this isn't so bad. And so I think that those examples you mentioned are really applicable along a lot of organizations when there's a crisis situation or is there an issue is, having the leaders bring the calm and people looking at you. I think there was a great thing to bring up. And one final thing I wanted to mention that, because there was a couple specific things I wrote down that you picked up that you had talked about. There is a huge difference in being a leader in a volunteer organization where they can just tell you to pounce in and then just go home versus being a leader. Like, go back to some of Maxwell's books. He has one called The 5 Levels of Leadership. And some people have argued that this first level really isn't leadership, whatever. But he calls it the positional leader. Basically, I can stand in between you and your paycheck. If you don't follow my order, my command, my directive, then, at some point you can be disciplined, fired, whatever. So there's a level of, I can get away with this when I stand in between somebody and their paycheck. But when you have somebody that doesn't have to be there, they brought, like you said, in your case, you're out there on the Suburban, so like the Delaware model, and you've got an EMT that brings an ambulance out there that you desperately need to get this patient to point B because you're not throwing them in the back of the Suburban.
Exactly.
And now you went off, flew off on the handle, pissed them off, and they get in their truck and go home. It's like, all right, now what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
So those are great points.
So one of the things, images that my friend Danny Langlois instills, and you kind of reminded me of it, is as leaders, we need to be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Correct.
We don't need to go into a room and react to the heat and the energy that's there. We need to go into a room and we need to set the temperature. And like you said, by us coming in cool, calm, and collected, people are going to look to us and it's going to bring their anxiety level down. Whether it's people looking for leadership or in the emergency services EMS case, when we're dealing with patients, they're having a horrible day. They may be having the worst day of their life. They're already at a high level of anxiety and fear.
Yes.
And by you coming in calm, you can relax them. By you looking calmly to the family, you can maybe alleviate some of their fears and anxiety and angst. You can't eliminate it all, but you can certainly control it to a point where it allows you to operate. When there's chaos, you're not going to be able to make the best decisions. You're not going to be able to maybe do your skills properly. But if you control the situation, you make the time, then you're able to do a lot and accomplish a lot more. And sometimes one of the lessons that I tell new people is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So
Correct.
While people are hurrying and scurrying, trying to get somebody out, whether it's the firefighter trying to run and drag the hose off the truck quickly and they trip, now they trip and fall, they've delayed the hose getting there. Had they gotten off and just done steady pacing, they'd get the hose to the fire quicker. Same thing with moving the patients. You trip over a bag, now you're hurt, now you become another patient, and the first patient isn't moving at all. So move deliberately, have a purpose, but that doesn't mean drag your feet.
Exactly. And it's funny, I love that thermostat versus thermometer analogy, and I'll throw one last one in, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the segment and then get back to our next two questions. But back to what Maxwellism, you were talking about self-care, and you can't give good advice, you can't give good leadership, you can't give direction if you don't take care of yourself. Whether it's the analogy of, okay, put your oxygen mask on first, but what he talks about is being a river, not a reservoir. In a couple of ways. If you're on constantly take, and you don't ever give to anybody, okay, it's doing you okay, but it's not doing anybody else any good. And if you're not receiving end. Like if you're not well rested, in good shape, if you're not taking care of yourself, and you're constantly giving all the time, it's not going to be long before you're burned out and you're just done and over it, and you just can't give anymore. And so you got to kind of have that balance. So I like that quite a bit. But we've got a lot more to get into. So we're going to wrap up this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we'll be back with our next two questions in just a moment. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are here with Mike Chanat, and we will jump right into our second question. What was one of the biggest leadership challenges you've had to face?
Trust and delegation. One of earlier days, again, a call in New York City, in Brooklyn. It was a Saturday night into a Sunday morning. The nightclub was called the Sugar Hill Club, and it was a mass shooting. Basically, a patron had gotten ejected from the club, returned about 5 minutes later, and shot up the place. So where people these days, we're seeing a lot of school shootings and mass shootings. They've been going on for quite a while. But this was one, while we discussed, I don't remember if it was on or off air, about a lot of shootings and experiences in the city. Most of the time, there were one or two people. This was an instance where we had 10 people that were shot, and then several others that were hurt from either the glass of the shattered tables or from people just trampling and running out. So when I responded to the scene, and at this point in the city, we were working as two medics in an ambulance, not in a Suburban. So my partner and I show up. There are several other BLS or EMT units from a variety of places. And in New York City, for those people that aren't familiar with the system, at that time, the fire department had taken over EMS. So you had FDNY units. Certain areas where the city couldn't cover, hospitals provided 911 service, both as BLS and ALS units. So you had what we called voluntary hospitals. They participated in the 911 system. And then you had a variety of hospitals. So we had my hospital responded, another hospital where the Sugar Hill Club was located responded, and the EMS units. So here you are talking about building relationships from the previous segment.
Yes.
You know that there's people from different areas. Everybody's got kind of a different way of approaching things. So you need to collect these people, get them together, and to direct them. But as far as delegation problem was, when the EMS supervisor showed up, an EMS supervisor can be either an EMT or a paramedic. And I believe that we were saying initially that as a paramedic, you're told you're in charge of the scene. So one of my first fears here is, how am I going to treat these patients or leave with my patient and leave this to an EMT? Right. So my mind had to switch and understand that just because they're an EMT, they're there in a administrative capacity, not an operational capacity.
Right. A big difference between being the highest level on scene from a clinical patient care aspect than an administrative, like you said, operational kind of command and control aspect.
Yeah. So his job there was to make sure, one of the sayings that I've learned along my way is leaders think logistics.
I like that.
So he had to think about, where am I getting additional units to respond to the scene, and how to coordinate with the fire department that was there and the police department that was there. Because again, it's an ongoing, evolving crime scene. They're worried about evidence. We're worried about patient care, conflicting priorities at times.
Yes, quite a bit.
Yes. So you're dealing with that. And because of like I said, the fire department was there because of the gun smoke. Somebody thought there was a fire going on. So everybody in chaos is just going, and lights and everything else. So we walk into the nightclub. We're crunching on glass because of the shattered tables. And there's 10 people inside that we need to now triage. So I had started telling people to start triaging, figuring it out, where to go and whatever. About 2-3 minutes later, the supervisor shows up and he's here ready to take over. And I'm like, but you're an EMT, because you can see the patch on the shoulder
Right.
clearly. You understand the rank. And then I kind of clicked and understood, well, he's here to make sure that we're all safe. He's here to make sure what hospitals are available with how many beds, what capacities, and directing us kind of like a conductor. He's orchestrating and conducting where, who goes, and how. And I realized that I could get back to making clinical decisions with, okay, you guys need to leave now because they're a priority, they're a red tag, or they're a yellow tag. And again, these different color tags, green, yellow, red, and black, are just how we categorize patients based on the severity of their injuries and the how immediately they need to get to either a facility and or a OR for their injuries. So the more serious patients were the red and yellow tags, and we were telling them to get out, and we kind of had to take one of those. So I had to get over trusting that an EMT was able to do my job of deciding where to go and what to do. And then I also had to delegate to certain people, you're going to take this patient, you're going to take that patient. And one of the lessons as a leader is learning you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be the smartest person at the scene or in the room. So you need to be able to trust people. And again, this was kind of building up what would become my framework of communication, mindset, and empathy. You need to be able to communicate and build these relationships before you need them. I got to know some of the people that were showing up, and I was able to say, okay, I know they're competent. I know they're good. I know they're not going to freak out being by themselves. They're going to need a partner. So I'm going to pair them up. And all these things start clicking into place once you start trusting the people that are around you. So trust is a big thing. And then delegation is that other portion, because again, 10 patients, one paramedic, or even if I counted my partner, 2 paramedics, we cannot take care of 10 patients.
No.
You as a manager or a supervisor in an office setting, in a business setting, you can only effectively manage a certain amount of people in an office, keeping track of who's doing what and whatever, through whatever complicated process you're dealing, whether you're dealing with logistics in a warehouse or you're dealing with computing problems in a think tank. There's only so many people you have a span of control over, and learning to let go, trust the people that they're capable to do what you need them to do, and effectively communicating what needs to be done, but now not how it needs to be done, and then trusting them to be able to do it. That was a big lesson for me in that situation.
Nice. So, well, I had similar, but it's funny when you were talking about the shooting, the mass shooting and the chaos and everybody there. I was thinking back on my previous career, and like I said, remember we had one relatively similar to that, roughly same patient count, same type of thing. Somebody went into a club and same thing, just started shooting up the place.
Yep.
And it was funny. Well, it wasn't funny at the time. We laughed at it afterwards. That the one cop pulls on scene, and he's, when we go into the building, he's got his sidearm. When we come out of the building, he's got his shotgun, and he's got. It's like, okay, well, they're definitely.
When did it change?
Right. Or there's been a change. Yes, there's been.
Yeah.
A little
When did it escalate? What changed, and why weren't we informed?
Yeah. There's quite a bit of that, but yes, when you're trying to triage and realize, but you're right, it is difficult when you realize that, okay, I might be the most experienced person here. I might be the best person to do that command and control, but right now that's not the position that I'm holding, right? I'm here clinically doing this specifically for patient care, and somebody else can take that burden off of me, and they can find at the hospital, who's got what, and actually take that burden off of you, so you can worry about, let's do the more clinical end while they're dealing with the operational logistics end of it. And it can be a tough one, especially when you're used to doing that all the time. It is hard to let go sometimes.
That's one of the things you have to do. Again, going back to adaptability, as part of one of the characteristics of a good leader is being flexible and knowing when to shift gears, whether it's shifting gears in your sense of urgency or shifting gears in terms of your role. Because at this point, like you said, I might be the most senior person there, the most capable of doing that job, but my patients need me. And I need to be taking care of the patient. I need to trust and delegate.
Correct. Really hard to do, but it only takes once or twice where you try to do it all and end up getting burned, and you're like, okay, yeah, that was dumb. I'm not going to do that again.
Yes, yes. And unfortunately, and I think we've was Oscar Wilde again. I think the quote was, "Experience is what they call mistakes," or like you said, you got burned, and you're not going to make that mistake again. You're going to experience because I messed up last time.
We've all made tons of mistakes. One of the things, we talk about some different maximalisms, and one of the things I like about, and it fits a lot of different categories, but it goes into face of some conventional wisdom, is like experience is not the best teacher. And you're sitting
Yes.
there thinking like, okay, the what? You're like, evaluated experience is the best teacher. So
Yes.
you could have a mistake on a scene, on a call, on a fire operation, on anything, any project that you're doing in the corporate world. If you, that's why I like going back and doing a hot wash or an after action or some kind of sit down and let's reflect on how did that go? What was good about it? What was bad about it? What would we change and do different next time? And so that way you're being intentional and iterating. So that way, oh, okay, we did make this mistake. Cool. This is what happened. All right. No big deal. We'll make sure that doesn't ever happen again. And then when you put those processes into place, they don't happen again. You just keep getting better and better.
I'm going to tie what you just said back into my academia side.
Yeah.
Learning doesn't happen until you have changed behavior.
Correct.
So you might have a lesson. Don't put your hand on the fire. That's the lesson. But if you put your hand on the fire again, you didn't learn from the lesson. So there's a reason they're called lessons learned, because there was knowledge that was imparted, which is the mistake. There was, like you said, there was an evaluation of what went wrong, what could we do to improve it, and then you as the leader enacted or executed on change. And that change is the learned behavior, and that's hopefully a better output or an improvement to what you previously did.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is not just, well, what did we do wrong? What can we improve? But what did we do right?
And what can we do better? And what can we do again, or should we do again? Exactly, like you said. I like to always have people say, "Give me one good thing, give me one bad thing," because a lot of times what I found, and it kind of ties into like the mental health and the wellness, is you'll sit there and you'll beat up on yourself. Oh, it was bad, it was bad, it was bad, it was bad. And I had a medic ask me, and I trusted her because I would go to her and we'd always like kind of bounce things off each other, and we built that trust and relationship where we knew that whatever we talked about would stay between us.
Right.
And I was telling her that while I wasn't totally hung up on a 4-year-old seizure patient that I had, there was just something that was nagging me for a couple of days. She said, okay. She also happens to be the QA person, so she kind of walks two different ways. QA is quality assurance. So, but I know I can trust going to her with a confidence and not being it. Again, she's a great example of leadership. She creates an environment where it's safe to discuss problems.
Yes.
And not have to worry about it. So I went to her and I'm talking about, she says, okay. She pulled up the call report. We looked at the call report. She goes, check, 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 check. She's telling me everything I did. She says, okay, tell me what happened at the scene. And I'm telling her the story and everything else. She says, you know what? Everything was good. What did you do right? You got the patient off the scene. You established an IO. You were able to give the medications. You were able to bag her and control her airway. You got her to the hospital, and they managed her. I was like, but there was just, like I said, I didn't know what was hanging over me and nagging me. But after just, I guess maybe I needed a reassurance that I did the right thing, even though I knew I did the right thing. So by, again, explaining to her everything that was done, her reviewing the paperwork, she says, everything was fine. You did everything right. So reviewing what went right is a very key thing. And by going over what went right, shores you up that you did the right thing and that despite what the outcome was, there was nothing you could have done to change it.
Correct. And what I like about that too is you hit on something really important that I wanted to make sure that people realize it, especially if they've never been in emergency services, but it's not just applicable to emergency services. It's so easy to ruminate about what you did wrong or what didn't go right. That's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit more difficult sometimes to uh, look at what went well and remind yourself, hey, we did this, we did that, everybody went home, we had a successful, there's a lot more things that went right than a lot of times we give ourselves credit for.
Exactly. And sometimes, again, this is why having a diverse team is important. You get somebody else's perspective, you get a fresh set of eyes looking at the same problem, and they're able to see the good that came out of it. And that kind of leads into something we as leaders need to do, whether it's mentorship or coaching. It's looking and knowing our people, building those relationships, and knowing when somebody's down or somebody's out, and to be able to give them a different view than they're looking at themselves at.
100%, 100%. And that is a perfect cue into our next question. So the next question is, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make today?
I kind of have a few things underneath
Sure.
this area. I'll bang the list out and then kind of expand on each of them. One of
Sure.
them is a lack of empathy. Another one
Mhm.
is over reliance on authority, and we kind of touched upon that earlier. And the last part is kind of neglecting mental health.
Gotcha.
So, starting with the first one, with the lack of empathy, we need to remember that our patients are having a bad day, so we need to take care of them. If we're back at the station, maybe our employees, our workers, the EMTs and medics that work for us are having a bad day. Everybody used to say that you're one person at home, you're one person at work. What happens at work should stay at work. What happens at home should stay at home. But your
Yeah.
your provider that is going through a rough divorce at home, or is going through financial woes at home, or is caring for a sick loved one at home, that's going to impact the person at work. I might be a great provider, I might be a great firefighter, I might be a great police officer, but if I'm at work and in the back of my mind I'm worried about my sick child at home, I'm worried about my dying parent at home, or I can't stand that, you know what, and insert expletive, that's at home going through a divorce, whatever it is, that's going to carry on, that's going to weigh into, and it's going to impact. You
Yes.
don't split yourself. You don't put on a mask. You don't take off a mask. You are who you are. A person is a whole thing, and we as leaders need to look at it. So we need to, again, be genuine when we ask, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? How are you doing? We need to try and understand where it is that they're coming. One of the lessons that I had here, that I learned from somebody that flipped a switch in my head, a lot of times in leadership development and in classes and books, everybody always talks about difficult discussions.
Mm.
So what does the name imply? It's a discussion that's going to be difficult. So we're already worked up in angst ourselves about having to do this.
Yeah.
Somebody reframed that for me, and I've adopted it, and I love it. Instead of having a difficult discussion, a DD, let's have a CC, a caring conversation. bring that level of empathy that I'm saying is lacking. People are always looking to discipline. Hey, you've been late 5 times this week. Or instead of, are you okay? What's going on? I've noticed you've been coming in late. Two totally different tones.
Correct.
Caring conversation, I'm not looking at it that, oh God, I don't really want to, I got to go talk to Johnny. No, I'm happy to talk to Johnny and Roy. Why? Because I care about the guys. I know they've had a couple of rough calls the last couple of days. What's going on, guys? Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what's going on. I want to know. I want to help you. What can I give you? So a lot of things that, again, like I said, the first part is people are lacking the empathy. The next thing is going back to what you were saying is they rely on authority, and that first level that you were talking about, the person that stands between you and the paycheck, there's only so long until you tell them to go F themselves, and you're going to walk, you're going to lose them. Or you tell somebody that well, I'm going to do this because I'm in charge and it's my way or the highway, or you got to do this. But I'm a Red Cross volunteer. I'm here giving you my time, or I'm at the soup kitchen because I want to help my community. I don't need you to tell me I have to do this or I have to do that. There's a lot of volunteer organizations out there, a lot of civic associations that are out there. People generally have a genuine concern and a desire to help. They want to make the world better. They want to feel fulfilled. They want to do something that gives them meaning. Mm-hmm. So they join these volunteer organizations, whether it's being on the school board, being a volunteer at the library, your local Lions Club, Rotary Club, the VFW, wherever. All these, or your local volunteer fire department, local volunteer ambulance. They're all volunteers. And some people don't understand that they can go volunteer somewhere else.
Yep.
They can give their time somewhere else, because time is the most precious commodity any of us have. And it's a limited resource. So where we spend it and how we spend it is going to change. So if you're going to tell me that I got to volunteer 48 hours a month because I got to do 4 12-hour shifts, when the agency down the block says I only got to pull a 6-hour shift once a month. Okay. They're not barking at me because I missed an hour or two here because I had to get up early and go to work.
Yep.
Or I had to come in late because I was taking night classes trying to improve myself and get that bachelor's degree so I can get that better paying job or get that promotion at work or whatever. Did you sit there and, again, tying back to the lack of empathy, did you ask them why they're not coming in for the 48 hours? And instead of barking at them and telling them, learn that things work on collaboration. What can we accomplish? How can you help us? How can we help you? And collaboration is where you get things done. And collaboration works on relationships. And relationships ties back to, again, communication and building it one conversation at a time. Walking in and saying hi, as opposed to just walking past the individual, whether it's the security guard at the front desk that checks your ID cards, whether it's the dispatcher you have to walk past, whether it's the secretary at the front of the office suite that you walk into. Say good morning, good afternoon, hello, good evening, hey, how are you? And genuinely listen. Because these relationships are going to allow you to collaborate and make things happen. 100%. One of the things that I found is when I was struggling, I had certain people that would come to me and say, hey, I think you should do it this way or try that. Or so. People genuinely want to help you, and they're going to help you if you're open to it and you're willing to collaborate and you're willing to work together, because everybody understands together we're going to achieve more than we will individually.
100%. One of the things that I think is almost a prerequisite, and it goes back to the empathy, really, because I don't think you can have empathy without this, but you have to have some level of actually genuinely caring about people.
Yes.
If you just absolutely don't care about people at all, it's going to be very difficult. Any empathy you have is probably going to be fake, and people are probably going to be able to tell. But I did an interview a little while back with a guy, Mike Chanat, and he had mentioned when he was in the Army, he had a promotional party, and one of his mentors was basically, "Hey, are you going to invite Jeff?" Jeff was the janitor, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, "Why would I invite Jeff?" And then he went down the line. Well, when you have a senior officer or senior guys coming in, who's the one that helps you get the play straight, Jeff? Well, when you have this going on, who's the one that helps you, Jeff? Well, what about when you have this thing or that? And he started laying out all these things that he didn't really understand, and it's like, who's help? And then finally, who's helping you be successful and
Mm-hmm.
be able to get this promotion?
Yeah.
Jeff. Okay, yeah, so it understands it, like you said, whether it's a security guard, for everybody does an important job. They all bring value, and like I said, if you can genuinely care about it, there's going to be a time where you may need something from them, or like I said, it's the best way to go to genuinely care and reach out and have empathy for everybody that's there. Because like you said, you never know at what point, you're nasty with the secretary, but the secretary for the chief is the one that's going to put your thing on the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's
a lot of times I used to joke at the police department is I knew a lot of low people in high places. So it wasn't, I didn't know the chief. I didn't know the chief, but I knew his driver. So I can go to Mike and say, "Hey, Mike, blah, blah, blah." And then Mike would whisper into the chief's ear in a casual conversation and things would happen.
Yep.
So my friend John Kavanaugh and I always talk about how healthcare is a spectrum in terms of care.
Okay.
And last fall, I had a bout of pancreatitis that put me in the hospital for 11 days.
Ooh.
Because I needed Dilaudid every 2 hours just for the pain because it was that bad.
Ow, ow, ow.
So while I was there, what John and I had talked about previously, I got to, again, observe first-handedly. So the lady that would come in and mop the floors and make sure that my environment was clean and that I wasn't getting infected, she came in every day. She had a smile. She enjoyed her job. She always had a pleasant conversation. And even though English wasn't her first language, she didn't let that stop her from having some sort of conversation with you and interacting with you. One of the food service people, she noticed one day when I went from clear liquids to mushy stuff to real food. She was looking at my tray and she says, "You didn't eat. Are you not?" I said, "No, I'm hungry. I don't eat yogurt." She says, "Well, I can get you applesauce if you want." And then because of the way my stomach was, while I'm a avid coffee drinker, I had down to tea to be a little more soothing on my stomach at the time. She says, "Do you want tea?" She started doing it. So you never know where people. It wasn't just my gastro that was coming in. It wasn't just the hospitalist that was coming in. It wasn't just the nurses in the med-surg unit that were coming in. It was these other people that were making my stay pleasant and were helping and contributing to my well-being. My well-being wasn't just the care for my medical thing. The knowing that my environment was clean, having a pleasant smile and a conversation in the morning when the housekeeping came in, having somebody who looked out for me to make sure that I was able to nourish my body so I could recover and go. And these were just little things from different people that made an impact on my stay and my go, which is why, again, it's a spectrum. It's that janitor that cleans up the trauma room or the trauma bay so that the next patient can come in.
Yep.
It's the secretary who knows where that form is that you're able to get and sign, or, "Hey, you're now in charge of the holiday party. Where am I ordering this food from?" Well, the secretary knows where we got it from last year. One of the things that one of the holidays that I like is Administrative Assistant Day.
Oh, nice.
So I forget when it is. I believe it's like April or something. But we all, at the NYPD always made sure that the civilians that were in charge of payroll got flowers.
100%.
And it wasn't about payroll. You knew your money was coming. You knew your
Yeah.
hours were right. But these were the same people where when you put your request in, your paper request for day off or your paper request for getting compensated for your overtime, whether it went to the bottom of the list or to the top of the list, whether it got approved or denied, because
Yep.
they had to look and juggle to make sure the staffing was available. So they can decide that if you were rotten to them, they were
I get
probably
it.
rotten to you.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, you don't want to talk about the world being like that, but it's a fact of it. So if you're going to be a tyrant, be a nice tyrant.
Well,
If you
no
have
one
to,
can, exactly. No one's going to go above and beyond for somebody to do somebody a
yeah.
favor if you've been a jerk to them over and over and over. And it's not, like I said, doing it to get something out specifically, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just that karma, reciprocity, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it. It's no, like I said, no one's going to go above and beyond. Like, hey, I'd like to get Mike the day off, but I mean, we're kind of a top staff, but man, he really did me a solid last month, and let me see if I can move some things around and make it happen. Versus,
Yeah.
hey, we're at our max 8 off. Sorry, man, you're
Okay,
number
that's
9.
it.
Tough.
But that's the exact thing, and that goes back to building relationships and empathy.
Yes.
If you're caring about your workers, you're caring about your people, they will know that. They will feel it. If you see them and you hear them, they will feel such joy inside, and they'll be able to they'll want to do above and beyond. These are the ones that you're going to have to kick out the door. Like, okay, no, we'll finish that tomorrow. No. There are people out there. Why?
Why
Because
not?
you respect them, because you care about them, and you know about what their dog's name is. You know how many kids they have. You know what their spouse's name is. You do know that so and so passed away, and you sent either a card or flowers, or you showed up at the wake representing the company, not because you're representing the company, but because you're there paying respect to your employee, and that you're caring about them as an individual, and you're there for their time of need. So it's their loss, but you're, again, their time of need. You're there to help them.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And that's the thing. I mean, like you said, it goes back to just a genuine caring of people. But if you build those relationships ahead of time, you even mentioned in the first segment, because you had relationships with the dispatchers and the hospitals and the Red Cross folks and all these different people that when something bad happened and you needed to capitalize on that, you could just pick up the phone, and it wasn't, "Hi, I'm Mike from the police department," and blah blah, and you had to go through this explanation. It's like, "Hey Joe, it's Mike. Hey, how's it going, Mike? What you need? This is what I got. Blah 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 blah. Oh, okay, let me get you over." Greases the skin. It just makes life a whole lot easier. Like I said, because you built those relationships up ahead of time. It's just absolutely can't emphasize that enough.
And like I said, the final thing that I was saying is neglecting mental health. While we've gotten better with dealing with cumulative trauma, it's still a thing. It's a lot safer these days to say, I'm not feeling good, or I'm not handling this. And the things and the horrors that we see, whether fire, police, EMS, where somebody should never see it once in their life, we might see it 3-4 times in a 12-hour or 24-hour shift.
Right.
And instead of, we as supervisors, we as leaders need to see, hey, that really bothered so-and-so. Take them aside, say, listen, you know what? You stay off the next call. We got you covered. Or, hey, you need a little time to get something to eat because you guys have been running around. Here, take a break. I'll jump on the bus. I'll take care of it. I'll ride the next call in. This way you can finish eating, or you can actually start eating. Or, hey, why don't you stay back and you talk to so-and-so, and we'll take care of it, or whatever. Or do you need to go home? Is there anybody we can call? What do you need? Take care of them. People and our minds can only stretch so far before it snaps. Different people have different triggers. One of my classes that we took on CISD, we were discussing, excuse me, whether programs should be mandatory or voluntary. And I don't think we ever came up with a definite answer one way or the other, because for some people, even though it's compulsory that everybody who delivers a baby has to go to this class,
Right.
everybody who shows up on a burning trash compactor has to go to this class. Uh, Whatever simple thing is, for some people, it might help them to talk about the childbirth, might help them talk about putting out the dumpster fire. But for other people, it's, you know, I was fine with this until you made me come here. Now I'm and I keep hearing this. I'm hearing about, and then they snap, not because of the initial incident, but because they were forced. So, seeking help is an individual thing. Seeking help is something that has to come from within. But creating an environment where you let people know that it's okay not to be okay, that feeling sad, feeling upset, feeling rage at the senseless loss of life or the situation that went on, it's normal. It's human. We all process it. We all go through it. Having it hang around for a couple of days, that too could be normal. But if it starts going longer, as a leader, you should be noticing that things haven't gotten better, they haven't improved, and that we need to step in and we need to provide them. We need to let our people know that, hey, we have an employee assistance plan or program. We have a CISD team that you can talk to.
Yeah.
Your healthcare plan allows options for you to go to a private person. You don't have to come to the department office. We have people you can talk to. Here's a connection. Here's the suicide hotline. Here's the whatever. And by, again, growth mindset as a leader, growing, learning, understanding, being aware of all the programs that are available through your agency or through the unions or through whatever organization you belong to or that are in your area, knowing that allows you to come and be a better person to your peers, to your subordinates, and to your superiors, and offering them answers.
Oh, 100%. And one of the things, and two things I wanted to throw out. One, for the listeners who have never heard of it and don't know what it is, Mike was talking about CISD. It's Critical Incident Stress Debriefing. And it originally came around when there was some really major calls and incidences, and realized that people were just not able to deal with it, and they were having a lot of adverse mental health problems. And I think, kind of going back to what you were saying, there are some lower level calls. I'm great with the options. One of the things I do like, and this is same thing, it's kind of nuanced, but most of the time when you have a major incident,
Yeah.
you're going to end up having some sort of hot wash or after action or debrief anyway. Bringing in, so I mean, that kind of bringing in the team.
At that point, no. At that point, it segues nice and it fits in together because you're going to be discussing what's going on, what went bad. Well, so-and-so started shaking or got frozen. That's one of the things that you're going to say is a negative. Well, now you've brought it out. Well, hey, let's process with why they froze and why that happened and how we can improve it. So it does tie in together with having a CISM team or CISD team come in during a whitewash or an after action review and stuff like that. It's a perfect time to work together. But again, one of the things we were talking about is it compulsory or not? So if somebody decides to walk out, you can't, again, pull that authoritative thing and say, you have to stay here.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, it depends on the type of incident and type of call. Like I said, I know it's not black and white, but there's some things that, okay, well, you had a shooting or, somebody may have had you were talking about a pediatric cardiac arrest.
Mm-hmm.
There may be, especially 2 and a 12-hour shift, it's kind of tough no matter who you are, because they just don't happen that often. But I had a guy that I worked with a long time ago, and we realized what happened afterwards. He absolutely froze up on a pediatric code. Absolutely, just completely froze up and just dropped the ball.
Yeah.
But come to find out, it was the kid that he was resuscitating basically looked exactly like his kid. And that's all he could do is see his kid on that stretcher. And it just put everything in a whole different light. Talk about empathy. Once we kind of realized, he still did the right things, but I mean, it was just one of those, it was tough for him and he had a hard time dealing with it. But I think there's some of the big incidences, like you have a big structure fire and maybe you have a couple of fatalities on there or whatever. you're going to have pretty much a mandatory after action for everybody that was on that
Yeah.
scene, regardless. And what I like is maybe not having them in the foreground, but having those mental health professionals, those CISD team members in the
Walking.
background to be
Yeah.
able to be there in case something does come up. At least they can help approach it from a certain aspect for the times that you are going to be there for kind of a mandatory after action. Because
Yeah.
like I said, especially with a big incident like that, it's you're going to do it anyway on most structure fires. But then when you have, say, just using that as an example, a big fire, multiple alarms, may have had some casualties or some fatalities, then you can really start getting into, okay, you need to bring in a variety of different resources for this particular after action because it was such a big incident versus,
Yeah.
like I said, a simple,
And simply just
engine and ambulance response for something that may have messed with somebody in the head and they want to go get the help, leaving
yeah.
it more mandatory than say the bigger stuff.
Yeah. And having these people present, they can kind of walk the audience. They can see, they can read
Yes,
reactions a lot better than we are because that's what they're trained in. That's what they do. And
correct.
you also offer the option of the, hey, we're kind of wrapping up, but if there's anything you want to talk, these guys will be here for a little while. So you
Yes,
can talk to them. You don't have to openly say it in front of everybody else, but you're, again, making it available. And as I said earlier on, we as leaders remove obstacles from our people being able to perform. So we
yes.
provided them, we brought them, the CISM, to them. We didn't mandate it, but we provided it and said, hey, at your time and your discretion, you can go talk to them. They're
Yeah,
here.
and that's the nice part about it is it's a happy middle ground. Okay, they happen to be there. Yes, the after action may be mandatory, but you don't force the same thing. It's kind of like they're there. There's some resource available. It makes it very easy and convenient because they're already there and they already have allotted the time for people to be able to go talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a, hey, you need to sign up for the shrink and go see
Yeah.
talk to them, to the department shrink and go get an eval. It's like, yeah, like you said, you can almost make things worse the way people internalize things. Some people, that's the perfect thing they need. Some people, it just rehashes it and they were already good with it and have set it
Yeah.
aside. And I said, just bringing it up really doesn't do a lot of good. But I think that's a good segment into our, we'll finish this segment on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We'll come back for our next and final segment and we will get into our last question in just a minute. Welcome back to our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are here with Mike Chanat, and we're going to jump into our last question. So, Mike, what do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Great question. One of the best ways is asking feedback. Is one of the ways you're going to get better is like, hey, how am I doing? Mayor Koch, actually, that was, I think, he was in the 70s, early 80s, and that was the title of his book that he wrote after he left as New York City mayor is How Am I Doing? Because what he did, he had a whole campaign. Once he was the mayor, he'd actually show up at bus stops, ride the subway, show up to events and say, hey, how am I doing?
I love it.
So seeking feedback, going out and seek feedback and understand that sometimes it's going to be negative.
It happens.
But that all goes back to being a leader and creating an environment where people are free to talk, whether it's giving their ideas or giving their feedback, and not worrying about being shut down or dismissed, and doing it. So if you genuinely have a growth mindset and you have a genuine curiosity to get better, you're going to ask people to evaluate your performance, offer you suggestions, and get you doing that. If you're not as open to going to other people, another suggestion that I have is embracing self-reflection. So whether it's the end of the day or the end of the week, sit down and say, kind of like an after-action review, what went right, what went wrong, how's my week, where am I, did I accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, which may be as simple as going to work, getting home, and collecting the paycheck. If you're higher up and you have a formal title, you have a formal rank and position, did you accomplish things on your to-do list? If not, why? Let's review it. Let's think about it and see what we can do to do that. Might come under Maxwell and might come under a few other people, but embrace lifelong learning.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You need to, and what's great about today and helps me I hate reading. I'll read a handful of books, but generally for me, it's rough. Um, with the advent of audiobooks, YouTube videos, podcasts, being an auditory learner, I can now take in that same information. So I can hear John Maxwell read me his book.
Yep.
I can hear and listen to Jocko Willing tell me about extreme ownership,
Yep.
and I can get different people voice over Dale Carnegie's book, and things like that. So whatever information is out there, there are different ways to consume it. Some people will consume it on the tablet, flipping through. Some people might be like my son, who's tactile. He loves reading. He constantly reads. The house is filled with books because of him. Um, we thought that once he got into middle school that we bought him a Kindle, because
Right.
instead of us having to have 10 books on every trip we went on, we figured we'd bring the Kindle and it'd be easy. Nope. He likes to smell. He'll open a book and smell the pages, feeling it, turning it. So for him, reading is tactile as much as it is mental. Um,
Nice.
so whatever your way of learning, growing, do it. There's online courses, there's free courses, there's paid courses, there's symposiums, there's conventions, there's all kinds of things to go to continue learning and making yourself better. Um,
Well,
while
one thing
you're,
I
go
wanted to
ahead, I'm
jump on
sorry.
it because some people don't realize. You're right. You mentioned YouTube, podcasts, all kinds of stuff. I absolutely love YouTube. I mean, you can learn just about to do anything. You can learn about anything on there. But I think a lot of folks may not realize that a lot of the big universities, I mean, your Harvards, your Yales, a lot of your big ones have, um, they call them MOOCs, MOOCs, but it
Yes,
basically it's a massive online, it's basically learning, and it's free. Most of them are free. They have these
yes.
massive online courses, massive open online courses, and you can go and register for them and take classes from Harvard or wherever for, like I said, for free. I
Oxford
mean,
and stuff like that. Top
exact
universities throughout the world, not just through the U.S.
correct.
And again, some of them will offer even certificates that you can hang on your wall, boast your resume, help you for that next promotion, moving up in the world, or just personal satisfaction and gratification. So yeah, there's committing to lifetime learning. Um, One of the things that we need to do is we need to practice our craft, practice our leadership. And when we
Mm,
talk about communication mindset and empathy, it's not just at the site of crash of Flight 587. It's not at the Sugar Hill Club with 10 people shot. Those are great places for leadership to happen, but leadership happens back at the station or in the office, talking to people. It's not just the big events, it's the small events. Practice being nice to people and empathetic on an everyday basis.
so
Uh,
I honestly
Practice.
think if you wait till the big events, you don't have the practice and you don't have the reps in. And so
Mhm.
when the big events happen, you're going to fail because you don't have that leadership muscle
Built up.
developed.
Yes. Um, I'm trying to remember the show. I think it was ER, and
Okay.
it might have been like season 3 or 4. They had an explosion at a factory nearby. There were benzene vapors that were going all over the place. People were passing out. And I love the beginning of it, that once the first couple of patients are crashing through the doors from self evacuation, and then once the ambulances start coming in, one guy um, who happened to be in a clinic off the ER smells it and says, "Oh, I think it's benzene." So that triggers one of the other doctors to say, "Hey, what's the emergency plan?" And they're like, "Oh, it's on in the lounge." So you see Noah Weil running into the lounge, pulling all these books off the shelf frantically, opens up this binder, and he's starting to read. That is not when leadership begins.
No.
Leadership, you should be reading up, brushing up, growing your mind, growing your skills, growing your relationships, as I've been saying all throughout, so that you can collaborate and get things done. So that when this rush of people come through the front door of your ER, or People are banging on your window of your ambulance as you're sitting on or squad car while you're sitting on the corner and saying something's happening around the corner. You're able to perform. You're able to do. You're
Well,
able
it's
to take
funny you
care.
mentioned that because that's probably, as much as you're absolutely right, we should be keeping up on that ahead of time. We should be, constantly reviewing that, being prepared or whatever. But
Mhm.
that's probably what they did in that ER episode is probably more realistic.
It was like I said, one of the most realistic scenes. And back then I wasn't good with software where I could try to cut clips and whatever, but I
Yeah,
always wanted to show that in a class because it's so dead on that this is not the time to learn what your emergency plan is or what your protocol for that situation is
correct.
or what your operations order is for moving or canceling this product in line or whatever. Wherever you are in your world, learn and get it done ahead of
But
time.
but it's sad because there's so many times, and I don't care if it is an operations plan, I don't care if it's an emergency plan, I don't care if it's a strategic plan. You do it, everybody high fives, it's over, you finish, the strategic
Yep.
plan or your emergency operations plan for the
Yep.
next 5 years. Like I said, and what happens? You throw it on a shelf, it collects dust, and nobody touches it again until someone realizes, hey, we have inspection coming up, and our operations plan is getting ready to run out. We have to have this thing renewed. Let's jump back into it. You
Yeah.
make a couple corrections, same thing, high five. But unfortunately, more often than not, that's why I'd say it was so realistic that most people don't ever look at it. They don't touch it. They don't deal with it. And
Yeah.
then when something happens, and it's the rare occasion, but you might roll the dice that one time and crap out, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden realize, oh no, we're not prepared because we haven't kept the plan top of mind and know what we're supposed to do when this happens.
That scene also brings us back to an earlier conversation. The doctor who was the attending in the ER asked the ward clerk,
Mm.
where is the plan? The ward clerk knew that it was in the doctor's lounge on the third shelf. The doctor who changes in the lounge didn't even know that the emergency plan was in his lounge. So again, great to know all the people. Great that clerk liked the doctor because they had a good relationship and he was willing to tell him, hey, it's in your lounge on the third shelf, as opposed to, I don't know.
Exactly. And that could have easily been the case. I
Yeah.
remember wife worked in an ICU for years, and a lot of times if the docs were having problems getting somebody to an MRI or getting results for something or getting X-ray or whatever, she would pick up the phone and call, and they would get upset because it was a teaching hospital, so you had a lot of residents and
Mm-hmm.
interns, and they would be upset like, well, how can you get that? I'm the doctor, because I actually know these people's names and I know their life, and I talk to them like they're actual people, and I don't crap on them, and we're friends, and
Exactly.
I built those relationships. So I could pick up the phone and get those results. Where you call and you be your normal jerk self, and they're like,
Yeah.
hey, 24 to 48 business hours. All right, we'll get it when we get it, right?
Exactly. That's it. Just getting past all that.
Yes.
In terms of like growing is whether as a leader you establish a mentorship program or as a leader you seek through reading books and podcasts or the free online courses. But sometimes you might even want to look for someone who's either outside of your agency or even outside of your environment. I've
Mm.
got 3 different people that I talk to on a regular basis that help me along with different ideas that I bounce off or what I should kind of do to kind of move forward in a certain area. All 3 of them have nothing to do with EMS or even the emergency services. And what's great about that is they give me fresh insight. And to me, leadership is universal. The principles, whether you're in logistics, you're in finance, you're in emergency service, you're in education, how you lead, how you motivate people, how do you inspire people, always is the same. How you learn to do it better is, are you willing to find somebody who'll show you the way? Find that mentor, let them be your guide, and walk that journey with you. You shouldn't be on that journey by yourself.
100%.
And,
100%.
and that reminds me of the last thing. Everybody says it's lonely at the top. It should never, ever be lonely at the top, because if it's lonely at the top, you're doing it wrong. You've isolated yourself from good people, people better than you, people willing to help, people willing to go above and beyond,
Yep.
and you're putting it on yourself. You should have people, you should have an inner circle, people of trust that you can relate to, whether, like I said, it's a mentor or your administrative aide, but the top should not be lonely.
No, and there's a couple of things that I'd really like to double back on that particular one, because I hear that a lot, and I 100% agree with you. And one of the things that I like that you mentioned is that it doesn't have to be somebody from your company, from your agency, from your even line of work. You can get peer mentorship. I mean, there's a lot of CEOs are members of Vistage groups. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing. They're able to all different industries, but they're all kind of in similar circumstances, and they can bounce off each other and kind of mastermind off each other, and best practices, and they all understand because they're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying with that, because you want to bring people along with you. And a lot of people, you're right, there's a certain boss to buddy to boss kind of thing, where hey, we were all palling around and we go out on the weekends and do XYZ. Well, now if you're their supervisor, there's that little bit of extra formality in it too. You don't have to shut them out and be a jerk, but on the other hand, you can't quite do the same things you maybe do before. But that doesn't mean, like you said, that you're completely there by yourself without having those channels of communication. So I really like what you were saying about even going outside of your company, your agency, your industry, even to get people that you can relate to and talk with, and share best practices and learn from. Maybe, like I say, get a mentor from elsewhere. Maybe even sometimes having somebody to mentor
Yeah.
that's in the same or elsewhere, because then, you know, one of the things I learned, I got spoiled very quickly, and you'll appreciate that, this being in the in doing EMS education, is that you always hear the uh, expletive of, well, those who can do and those who can't teach. And I've seen, unfortunately, one or two examples of that. But when I started off, I got spoiled because most of the folks that were in the paramedic program teaching, or especially my first EMT instructor,
Mm-hmm.
those guys were some of the best. And I picked their brain when I was, writing calls with them, going through the programs and learning and interning. And I'm like, why do you teach? And it's like, I'm like, you're good at what you do. And you told them the adage. And of course, they
Yeah.
get upset about it. And they're like, well, I teach so I can be the best. I teach because that keeps me sharp. It keeps my head in the books. I have to prep for my classes, and I have to answer questions from the students when they come back from writing shifts and they say, hey, this happened. Why did my preceptor do X? Okay, well, let me explain it to you. So I mean, he said, that's what keeps me the best, is because I teach, not, you know, I'm a crappy provider, so nobody will
And
hire me. So I just went to go teach.
that you brought that in, it kind of reminded me of everything we talked about the last couple of segments. Is, as an educator, you're there to lead,
Yep.
and you're developing the next generation of providers, where leaders are generating the next generation of leadership. But in terms of teaching, you need to create a safe environment for people to ask questions and not say, oh, they're going to blow me off or reject me. You need to realize that, hey, you're not the smartest person in that room. You might be the most experienced, but you may not know everything. And then if you're teaching refresher classes, where people who have already done it, but they need to recertify their certification, they might have a thing or two that they can teach you
100%.
because of their experience.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite experiences is, we would get a few of the critical care paramedics that worked on the baby bus, where they're
Mm,
doing all the high risk infant transports.
yep.
They would come in when we were talking about OBGYN and pediatrics and stuff. They had some inside stuff on assessments. They had some great tips on technique for
Mm,
starting IVs and doing stuff. So there's always something to learn. So classroom, those that can't teach, those that can teach because they understand they're learning, and they teach because, and they continue to learn to be the best. You have to, if you're thinking about getting into teaching or thinking about leadership, don't be afraid, because you don't, again, have to be that smartest person. You're going to learn, and it's going to push you to be better. And as long as you're willing to learn, you will get better and you will be that person that you think you should be.
100%. That was one of the reasons, because of that guy, that kind of got me into training and development, that got me into teaching, that got me into, getting all these different instructor certifications early on. Because if I wanted to be like this guy, because he was amazing and I just had the utmost respect for him, if I wanted to emulate him and kind of go along that same path, I'm like, well, what did he do to get there? Teaching was one of the things he did, and he explained why. I wanted to do the same thing. So I jumped into teaching and doing a lot of the same things just to develop and hone my
Mm-hmm.
skills. Same thing. So I get, and one of the, I laugh because you were talking about recertification classes, and this can be applicable across a lot of different sectors. But when people come in, when I was teaching for the community college, and I think the first couple of refresher classes I was helping out with, it was very intimidating because it's not like you're teaching new providers coming in and you're automatically more experienced than them. You have a hodgepodge of providers. All of them have at least been doing it for the 2 to 3 years or whatever that their certification has been active. Obviously, they've got at least a baseline experience because
Yes.
they now have to recertify. But so many people, they're recertifying for the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth time. They've been doing this 10, 15, 20 years or more. And at first it's intimidating, but when you start the dialogue and the conversation, that's really where the learning can begin, because everybody gets to learn from everybody else's experience on the topic. You just kind of start the ball rolling with the topic and get everybody talking. And it's amazing,
Mm-hmm.
how much you feel like as the instructor, you're cheating because you're like, I'm learning all this stuff from these guys that have probably 200 years of experience sitting there in that room that you wouldn't be able to
Yes,
tap in and have access to if you weren't doing that.
exactly. And that's a similar style that I had learned from a senior instructor. He used to start the Monday morning off with the, hey, anybody have any interesting calls over the weekend? And regardless of what the topic was on Monday, it was a free forum for everybody to talk about calls. And then inevitably, somebody had a job on whatever the topic was for Monday. And Tony would then segue right into that. But he would start picking the brains of the guy and let the person who just did his call teach the class by giving
Nice.
up. And he would ask the right questions to pull out the knowledge, but he was able to get it out from a provider, and it worked well with the refreshers because you're now seeing that this stuff is real, not just us putting the textbook slide out for you to pass the state answer. It happens in reality in the front lines where you are.
100%. 100%. So I would absolutely wrap up probably that last question on just being a lifelong learner. It's the best way to improve leadership skills overall. So with
Mm-hmm.
that, tell our listeners how they can connect with you. Tell us a little bit about your company, what you do with first responders and EMS, and some of the leadership stuff that you do with that, because I was really interested in seeing that. But also, like I said, tell them a little bit about that, the services you provide, how they get in touch with
Sure.
you, website, LinkedIn, all that kind of good stuff. And they're like, hey, man, I want to learn a little bit more about Mike. How do I make that happen?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for having me here, giving me the opportunity to talk about leadership, because again, it's a passion. I love sharing ideas and growing from that. So
Same.
thank you, Dr. Dave, for that. If they want to get in touch with me, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so they can find me on LinkedIn. I do have profiles and some videos on YouTube, occasionally on X, and Instagram, Facebook. But the predominant place to contact me and DM me is going to be through there, and or just go to mikechanat.com, and you're able to see what I do. So what does Mike Chanat Leadership Development do? It provides an opportunity for whether you're a new EMT or a new paramedic, you're somewhere in mid-career, or you're looking to take your leadership or former supervisory managerial position to the next level. We perform coaching services, mentorships. We can do workshops. I can come to your place, provide a keynote, or go over a session. My framework that I've developed over these almost 40 years is called the Key Three. The Key Three are communication, mindset, and empathy. So either each pillar or a combination of the pillars will give you anything that you need in terms of developing yourself and becoming a better individual, peer, provider, or leader.
Nice. And your target market is typically public safety, correct?
Correct. Like I said, what brings a uniqueness to our services. Not only do I do not only do I do EMS, but I do have experience with the fire service and with law enforcement. So I understand the unique needs. What allows me to walk through these three different worlds when I'm on a scene, I understand the different people's needs. A lot of times when we have heads colliding is when we don't understand the other side. So what I can do for each of these agencies, fire, police, or EMS, is I can customize the training so that not only are you developing your people, but the relationship building component of it, I can give you insight as to what people's perspectives are, what they're thinking, and why they're thinking like that, and how you can enhance it and collaborate as opposed to knocking heads.
I like that. Seeing it from their point of view, it's a lot easier to be collaborative when you can do that than just saying, hey, here's my silo, here's your silo. And like I said, where they don't match, you end up butting heads instead of realizing, oh, okay, here's the perspective that they're coming at this from. I love that quite a bit. So we will link up, we'll have links to Mike's site, his LinkedIn, in the description and the bio. And with that, thank you again, Mike, for being on.
Sir.
And thank you guys for watching. And we will be back with another episode of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave next week. So take care, and we will see you then.